Hey folks, welcome to another set of 8th grade science video notes. Today we'll be talking about how the actions of humankind affect the world and the causes and effects of climate change. Here are the state standards that we'll be covering. Let's get started. In general, pollution is when something that's harmful to an environment gets introduced into that environment. Some examples that you're likely familiar with include industrial pollution, things like smoke from factories or toxic waste being dumped into waterways, oil spills, the exhaust fumes from the vehicles we drive around in, and the trash that gets left laying around on Earth or in the ocean. The three main types of pollution that we're going to focus on are land, water, and air. When humans or natural processes damage land, we call that land degradation. One of the ways we damage land is through the building of cities. When we build cities, we clear out and take up natural land areas. Cities are made up of several buildings with concrete foundations, paved roads, sidewalks, and all sorts of other materials that block water from reaching the ground. Most cities have storm drains to collect the water and move it elsewhere to reach to the soil. But the water doesn't get to infiltrate into the ground naturally. So as we continue to build onto our cities, we call this urban sprawl, the water runs off to a point even further away. This can lead to erosion in new places and a lack of available water in the old places. Humans most actively damage land through deforestation. When we remove trees, whether we're using them to make something or just to get them out of our way, we disturb the underground root system and loosen the topsoil. When we do this, the soil can more easily be moved by water or wind, which we call erosion. This can lead to the area no longer being able to support plant life, making it more like a desert. This is called desertification. We've gotten a lot better about it over the years due to many laws and regulations that prohibit certain trees and other plants from being moved across borders, but humans used to have a nasty habit of accidentally introducing invasive species into new environments. Invasive species, like non-native plants, wildlife, fungus, bugs, or diseases, are a threat to the native species of an area. These invasive species are called invasive because they invade the natural habitat of the native species, often using up many of the same resources and making the native species compete for necessary resources. This makes it harder for that native species to live. Anytime we add harmful things to our water supply, we call this water pollution. There are three major types of water pollution: thermal, biological, and chemical. When you add abnormally warm water to usually a cool body of water, you can harm the aquatic organisms that live there. This most often occurs because of factories or nuclear power plants that use water to cool down their reactors, then dump the water into a nearby river or stream. The same concept applies to introducing cold water to a naturally warm body of water. Most aquatic animals depend on the water to keep their body temperature regulated. So when we mess with the water temperature, we mess with the species living in it. Biological water pollution could be the introduction of a new invasive species of organisms to a body of water, or when we dump dead organisms or biological waste into a body of water. If our wastewater were to somehow get mixed into our drinking supply, this would be an example of biological pollution. Our municipal utilities departments do a really good job of keeping our poo water away from the water we drink, and I, for one, am very thankful for that. However, it's not impossible for our drinking water to become contaminated. For the most part, those of us on a well water system are relatively safe too, because we pull that water from underground aquifers that are only filled after water infiltrates through several layers of soil and rock, which filters it. Lastly, we call it chemical water pollution anytime harmful chemicals are added to a water supply. These chemicals could range from waste from a factory to fertilizer from a field. In an industrial setting, large factories might directly dump chemicals into a body of water. There are rules about what kind and how much of the chemicals they're allowed to dump into the water, but factories don't always follow those rules. When farmers spread fertilizer over their fields, especially right before a big rain, the runoff from that big rain can carry the nutrients in the fertilizer to the nearby water source. When this extreme surplus of nutrients is added to a body of water, we call it eutrophication. This might sound good because nutrients, right? But an increase in nutrients can increase the amount of algae in the body of water. Algae uses up dissolved oxygen in the water that other organisms in the water need. If there's too much algae, it's hard for other plants to grow and hard for the aquatic animals to breathe. As is often the case for oil spills or factory waste, these get dumped into a body of water at a single identifiable place. This is called point source solution, because it came from one point and we know where it came from. As for fertilizers from a field or some other contaminants finding their way into a body of water, we don't often know where they came from, and they may have come from multiple different places. As such, we call that non-point source pollution, because we can't pinpoint the exact location it came from. Our last type of pollution today is air pollution, which occurs anytime a pollutant messes with the balance of chemicals that make up our air. Particulates include tiny particles like dust, pollen, ash, and smoke, and that's the most noticeable type of air pollution, because it's not difficult to see. Natural sources such as wildfires and volcanoes are responsible for 10 times as much particulate pollution as humans on average across the world. However, in highly populated areas, humans create 90% of that particulate pollution. The burning of fossil fuels, largely in electric power plants, industrial factories, or driving cars, creates several harmful gases. Sulfur oxides, like sulfur dioxide, naturally come from erupting volcanoes, but humans greatly contribute to the amount of sulfur oxides in the air by burning fossil fuels like coal. We're best known for burning coal to create electricity. Sulfur oxides, along with ground-level ozone, reacts with sunlight to make smog, which is like a hazy brown fog that can often be seen in highly populated areas. As molecules of sulfur oxide get higher into the atmosphere, they can react with water vapor and turn into sulfuric acid. This can later precipitate as acid rain and damage plant life in buildings and statues made of stone. Nitrogen oxides are primarily caused by the burning of fossil fuels. When nitrogen oxides react with atmospheric water, they create nitric acid, which then can also become part of the acid rain. Carbon monoxide often comes from incomplete combustion of fossil fuels, like when a car engine doesn't quite get the right mixture of gasoline and oxygen when it burns. Carbon monoxide can have very negative health effects on plants, animals, and humans. Carbon dioxide is harmful in a different way. We need a good layer of gases like water vapor, methane, and CO2 in our atmosphere. These gases help to trap in heat from the sun in a way very similar to how a greenhouse works. They let the sunlight through, the sun heats up the earth, and when the heat tries to escape, this layer of gases blocks it from leaving Earth's atmosphere. Since they work like a greenhouse, we call them greenhouse gases. They don't come from a greenhouse. The thicker the layer of the greenhouse gases, the harder it is for that heat to escape. This is known as the greenhouse effect. If our layer of greenhouse gases is too thick, it'll trap in too much heat, and that can have some devastating effects, as we've mentioned. There are several negative effects to pollution, but here's a quick summary. Land pollution makes it hard for the native species of plants, animals, and other organisms to survive in their own environment. Water pollution does the same, but we mostly notice how much more difficult it is for humans to obtain clean drinking water. Air pollution is by far one of the most wide-reaching types of pollution. Acid rain can erode stone and kill plant life. Toxic gases in the air can be directly harmful to organisms. And due to the greenhouse effect and an increase in the amount of greenhouse gases caused by the burning of fossil fuels, the average global temperature on Earth has risen more than it was supposed to over the last 80 years. It would take a massive global effort to really clean up our planet, but there are things that we are doing now and some things that you could do to help. Water treatment facilities keep our water clean, and they do a great job of it. When we have oil spills, they're nearly impossible to clean up, especially from oceans. But we have several groups trying to find better ways to clean them up every day. When we see trash outside, we can pick it up and throw it away. Granted, that trash usually ends up in a landfill and gets buried, but at least it would be confined to one particular spot. Occasionally, the trash ends up in the oceans too. There's a lot of great organizations out there that have put a lot of time and effort into researching ways to build trash collectors in the oceans that won't affect the ocean animals, but will collect the trash from the ocean to help keep it clean. Lastly, to reduce the amount of particulates in the air, you might use an air filter in your home. Cleaning up pollution is much more difficult than preventing it in the first place. You've heard the classic phrase, reduce, reuse, recycle, right? That's the key. We can reduce some of the pollution caused by driving our cars around by opting for public transportation, carpooling with others, or riding our bikes to and from places. We can also invest in renewable energy sources like solar, wind, and hydroelectric power to create electricity for us. We can also try to reduce the amount of electricity we use by using more efficient items like LED light bulbs or newer appliances. We could try to upscale old items or recycle as many trash items as we can so that they don't end up in landfills or the ocean. We can simply create less trash by purchasing items that are unwrapped or don't have a lot of packaging to them. To slow down erosion and eutrophication, we can be more careful about our farming practices and make sure we're using the land in a sustainable way. It's important for us to use the natural resources that we need in order to live happy, healthy lives, but it's also important for us to use them in a sustainable way so that they continue to exist after we're gone and our children and grandchildren will still have those resources to use when they grow older. This is called sustainability. We can maintain our environmental stability by reducing dependence on non-renewable resources and finding ways to use renewable resources to our advantage. It's also important to engage in conservation efforts in order to preserve our natural environment and the resources that come with it. Conservation involves reducing our waste and using our resources wisely. You'll do plenty of research on this, but here's a little bit of information on climate change to help you get thinking about it. As we mentioned, the average global temperature of Earth has increased by a lot more than it was supposed to since the Industrial Revolution. Most scientists agree that human activities such as burning fossil fuels and deforestation are the reason for this unexpected increase. As the temperature increases, the polar ice caps tend to melt, which adds more water to the ocean. The changing ocean combined with warmer air temperatures in different places around the world causes changes to global weather patterns. As you may have noticed over the last 10 years, we've been getting new record warm and record cold days each year, as well as record-breaking hurricanes, storms, etc. More CO2 in the atmosphere not only traps in more heat, but it creates carbonic acid when it reacts with water. This is making the ocean more acidic and changing the environment that sea life lives in. We know that climate change is real because scientists have done a lot of research into the historical temperatures of the Earth. They do this by analyzing ice core samples, crosscuts of trees, and Arctic sea ice, among other things. When they study past temperatures, they see a slight upward trend of temperatures until we get to the Industrial Revolution. Once humans realized they could burn fossil fuels like coal to make their own electricity, it all went downhill from there. Or should I say uphill? The average global temperature graph increases sharply from the industrial age to now. Adding more carbon dioxide to the atmosphere combined with deforestation, where we essentially strip the Earth's natural ability to use up carbon dioxide, is a recipe for disaster, and we're experiencing the effects of that now. Well, that's all for today, folks. Thanks for watching, and as always, if you have any questions, ask.